So we're live. Welcome, everybody. I am so excited for the new year, first of all. So that's super exciting. Hopefully, you can all see my screen. So, welcome, welcome. We have a wonderful guest speaker. I'm so excited to have Rebecca join us today. She has a wealth of knowledge. Rebecca, we had time, we sat down for lunch. I'm going to say, was it in like October or so, maybe?
I think it was still warm. I think
Yeah.
it was still like 700 degrees out. So it might have been September,
So we have people from all over the country on today's call and who'll be listening to some of our encore presentations. Just so you know, most of the people, Rebecca, are probably right in this sphere. We have most of the people are going to be in southeastern Pennsylvania. We get a lot of New Jersey and Delaware people as well. We've had people as far from Arizona. We had some people from overseas. We've had from Canada. Typically, the people that are on the call that are from like out in the West and all generally have a loved one in this market area that they want to help and provide some financial guidance to and some assistance. So our guest, I think, is going to be super, super valuable for that today. A little bit about who I am and what I do. I'm a real estate broker. This is I believe it's like my 38th year. I think it says 37. I'm on 38 years. I've been doing this. It's lots of fun. I enjoy immensely what I do. I do tons of speaking. I do tons of writing. I've been featured in all kinds of publications and articles. I pretty much focus on the senior home seller. That's kind of my niche of what I work on. And I help them with all their various issues, challenges, um, to usually figure how we're going to transition them from their primary residence to maybe some kind of assisted living or senior housing. On the call, there are some of my other people on my team, Brant Erickson, Samantha Baker, Michelle. We're all licensed. We all are here to help our clients. But what we're really here to talk about is our speaker today. And Rebecca Thompson, you have a fantastic, fantastic background. I'm so excited. Certainly, with your 20 years of experience, you do all kinds of things. Your company is locally sourced. I'm assuming because we have people in some various states, is that okay for you as well, Rebecca? That
Beacon Point is actually a nationwide firm. So my office is here in Pennsylvania, but I also have clients all over the country, and our firm has clients all over the country. We're actually, our home office is in California. We have 70 offices across the country.
Okay. And the best part I saw was your Villanova connection. So right down the street from our office is Villanova, and that is certainly near and dear to our heart as well. So that's awesome. And I wanted to ask you just a little bit about your Manor on Main Street, what exactly that is, because you have a lot of other things you're involved in with your board of directors and your committees in the Montgomery Theater.
So Manna on Main Street is, I live in Lansdale, suburb of Philadelphia. And Manna on Main Street is our local food pantry. I started volunteering for the organization probably almost 15 years ago, through a race committee. They actually do a 5K race that has grown. It's funny, we just started meeting again for this year's race, and I think when I started on the committee, we had about 150 runners and we were raising maybe $30,000. Last year, we had almost 600 runners and we raised almost $150,000. So, it's one of those things you never think something like this is even needed in your community. And we don't realize how much, particularly in the current setting, how much it's needed, and particularly in the senior space. Some of our uh, biggest communities of people that we serve with Mana are seniors.
So this is affiliated because I had the pleasure of doing some work in Philadelphia. I was on the line, and it was probably one of the best days I've ever experienced in
Yeah.
my entire life. Like it was a production line putting together dinners, and we took the whole office there. We spent the entire day. It was an awesome, awesome day, and it
It's
felt really good.
It's incredible to me not only to meet the people that we serve who, everyone's got a story,
Yeah,
right? But the people who actually work and who are employed by these organizations are just really outstanding human beings. To work in nonprofit, you're not going to set the world on fire in terms of salary or anything like that. And the selflessness of these people
it's
is
crazy.
just really inspiring.
That's so awesome. And I'm going to jump in, if I can, to our presentation. We have people, again, from all over. We thank you so much for spending your Saturday with us. It is a cold Saturday, but look, you're indoors and you're getting some good information. Um, so, Rebecca, what I find is, and one of the big questions that I get all the time is, how do you know when it's the right time, financially and emotionally, to make the move? And that's kind of what the crux of what we're going to talk about today is kind of that financial and emotional support. Because in my day to day as a real estate broker, I see kind of these four items right here are kind of when the transition usually occurs. If one of these things occur, it's just part of life that, we're involved. You're involved for the financial piece of the puzzle. I sometimes get involved to help them with, what to do with their stuff and where to go and the various different options that they have. But I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you get involved with your clientele in these kind of financial and emotional support transitions in people's lifetimes.
I think it's interesting. I think that the key word here, and probably surprises most people considering what I do, but the key word is emotionally, right?
Okay.
Yes, there are a lot of financial considerations, but a person has to be emotionally ready for this. And, I think it is 100% supportive of the old saying, hindsight is 2020, right? So the time to prepare is before, right? I am generally saying to people, when you're preparing for a move, it really needs to start in your 50s, right? This is not something you start talking about in your 70s, right? From a financial standpoint, right? Because there is reasonably big amount of planning that needs to happen from a financial standpoint. But and unfortunately, many, many times people don't come to me until after a death, a divorce, or, hey, I'm retiring in May. It's time for me to get a financial advisor. Really, it was time for you to get a
A
financial advisor
long time
10 years
ago.
ago. We'll help you now, but we really would have loved to have had you 10 years ago, right?
So this whole series, Rebecca, we talk about the proactive versus the reactive process in every one of this is our 18th um, recording that we've done, so workshop for people, and that's in every single one. That is our overwhelming theme. It's about being, proactive and getting starting. And I ask every single guest that question that you just answered, which I was getting ready to ask you, and you answered it, which is awesome, is when you should start. And you said in the 50s. I've had people say that, some of our legal people say starting in the 20s when you're married and there's kids starting to happen and everything. But I'm so happy to hear that you're starting well in advance.
Yeah, and I think, listen, it's January. It's that time of year where we
Yeah.
start, whether you call them resolutions or goals or intentions, any of those things. it really is a great time to really kind of start thinking about it. I think, when you say like start planning in your 20s, 30s, 40s, I completely agree with that. But I also think, again, from that emotional standpoint,
It's
it's
not.
really hard at that age. I wish I could convince every, 23-year-old to maximize their contributions to their 401(k). They'd be retired when they were my age, right? But the reality is, when we really need to get down and dirty with this and really buckle down, it's definitely the 50s.
So the point is starting at the 50s, start preparing. And what does that look like? Walk me through like that process, if you will. Do you meet with them in person? Is this on Zoom? Is the family involved? Do you have their kids? How does that whole process what does that look like?
I kind of look at it. We in my firm, and we'll put a resource for this. My firm does a piece on planning through the decades, and that's where I sort of look at it. And the first thing in every decade is assess, right? Where are you at? Where do you want to be? How are you getting there, right? And so kind of early on in the 50s, it's all about sort of making sure you're okay now,
Okay.
right? That you have a good foundation for now. Do you have an emergency fund? Is there some consumer debt you need to take care of? Are you maxing those retirement contributions?
Okay.
And then thinking about, what does retirement life look like? I have some people who say, I want to work because I want to, not because I need to, right? I have other people who say, I want to get out as soon as possible. And then I have other people who say, I'm gonna work till I die because if I stop, I'm just gonna die, right? It's like, so there are all sort of walks of life around that. And just having a very honest sort of understanding of what those goals are, and then looking at all of the sort of planning opportunities underneath each of those things. If um, if you want to retire early and you want to buy a house at the shore, are those goals conflicting, right? Can you do both? And what are you willing to do to have one or the other, right? Does retiring early mean you rent at the shore instead of buy, or does buying at the shore mean you're going to work 5 more years, right? So just getting really honest with yourself around that, but then also having a plan for the you know the awful things that happen in life, right? A death of a spouse or illness, any of those things. I mean, it happens. And again, like I said, unfortunately, so often people come to me after they happen and they haven't planned. So, do you have all the right things set up? Do you have life insurance? Do you need life insurance? Do you have long-term care insurance? And how does that fit into that senior housing goal, right? What does that look like? If you have long-term care insurance and you move into a continuing care community, where does that fit in and how does it impact the overall financial?
I deal with that a lot with my clients right now because I've been doing this so long, they're kind of all in that stage, if you will, where they're figuring out, which of these right senior housing options are right. But I see the long-term care, and then there's also these, they have timing issues. Some of them don't start for 90 days, and you need to get these policies going so that you get the coverage and you get the financial assistance that you need because these
Right.
places are not inexpensive. Plus, Rebecca, I'm also seeing that the timing to get in, it's not like
Yeah.
you can call them tomorrow and say, "Hey, I need a two-bedroom unit in, ABC retirement place." They're not available. You might have to wait 9 months, 2 years. I have people clients waiting 5 years.
I tell people all the time, if you if you visit somebody in a community and you really like it, get your name on the waiting
Yeah.
list. You usually have
Yeah.
to pay a couple bucks to get on, but a lot of times I'm seeing more and more of these communities, you pay maybe, a couple $1,000, you get on the waiting list and you can then participate in some of their
Yeah.
activities. So you really get in there and see what it's like. You can join their bridge club or whatever, go swimming if they have a pool. And it really is, I think, the smartest way to approach it. It again, from both the financial and the emotional standpoint, I think it's great if you can also, bring your kids, let them see it. The kindest thing you can do for your children is make these plans. Truly, and especially, I have one child, I'm an only child, and I think all the time, I would never put this on her alone. So having this stuff set up for your kids, it's twofold for me. A, it's kind to your children, and B, I want to be the person picking, right? I
Yeah.
don't, I and
You,
I don't want it to be this was the only place we could choose, we had to choose from, right? This is all we could do because we have an emergency situation, mom needs care, and this is the only place that has a bed. It's
how
the last
true.
space you want to be in.
And I think your comment about getting on the list is so important and vital. And the other piece is that a lot of these communities, it's a refundable. So they let you experience what life is like in the community, and you kind of figure out if it's the right fit or not the right fit for you and your family. But it's refundable. So like you have nothing to lose. And sometimes they'll call you and say, "Hey, we have a two-bedroom coming up. Are you interested?" And you could say, "Hey, I'm not ready," or "Yeah, I am." And you're on that list, so continually they're keeping you up abreast of what's available for you.
The other thing I tell people all the time is make sure you visit every stage of that continuing care, right? Because so often I see people say, "Oh my gosh, the apartments are amazing and I love the bridge group and they have we tennis on Saturdays and I love all of it." And then they, fall and break a hip and they're in skilled care and they're
And
miserable.
yeah, it's not
So
good.
make sure you see every stage and that, everyone is comfortable with every stage. I mean, obviously, places change over time, personnel changes, all of that, but having that sort of preview of what it's going to look like, not just for you, but for your family as well, I think is really, really critically important.
Yeah, plus the other thing that people seem to focus on a lot of these facilities is the food, right? So you get an opportunity to try a couple
Yes.
meals and see, is it to your liking? What do you think? Because that's the kind of the feedback I get from my clients all the time is,
And I gotta tell you, people need to visit these places
yeah,
because it is not nursing home anymore. I mean,
no,
these
oh my God.
places have incredible chefs. I was just had lunch with someone at one of the local continuing care communities, and I mean, it was I had truffle fries. I mean, it wasn't, we weren't eating mashed potatoes and goulash. It was really, really good. So
I had
you
shrimp
definitely
cocktail
have
at
to.
another one, and it was really good. And I also get a chance because I go and visit a lot of my clients that are in a lot of these different places, and I like to see how the facilities are actually running. And I went to one recently, and they were doing it. It's in a memory care unit, and I was just kind of sitting back and watching, and I was amazed at the level of care they provided, and like they were doing trivia and events and talking and doing like stretching and dance, and I was watching not only the people, like how engaged they were with this. It was like amazing to watch this. Like you could look at their face and see how happy everyone was.
Well, and I think senior care has changed tremendously. I
Yeah.
actually have a friend who owns an entertainment management company that he caters totally to senior communities. So the fact that there's a need and
Yeah.
for that, and that, the communities are keeping him and his staff employed, says something. It's definitely different than, it's not what our parents had, for
Yeah,
sure.
it's a totally different, totally different. And again, I think your advice to go out and, you know, look at some of them and get some, deposits and things down. We also work with a host of people in our senior housing world that are kind of experts, if you will, Rebecca, that I've used for some of my clients that want somebody's involvement to kind of help them compare, and they listen to what's important for the future resident, like what kind of needs do they have, both financially, emotionally, what kind of interest they have. And what they try to do is do an alignment and figure out, okay, out of the 25 in Pennsylvania that could potentially work economically for you, these are the four or five I think you should visit that I think are a good fit for, you and your family.
Yeah, I mean that's huge, because it is overwhelming, and again, is 100% uh, supportive of the idea that start early, because it is overwhelming. There's more out there than you think. But I think aligning sort of and some of the communities are religiously based. Does that align with you? And those are things. Um, I think the goal is always to keep the senior person as independent as possible for
Possible.
as long as possible. So what does that mean? Is there a church nearby that they enjoy? Is there a grocery store that's, carries their favorite things? Are there other activities and things, a movie theater, whatever it is, right? Are those things near and around so that that person can remain as independent as they can for as long as they can? Because again, we're talking a lot of times about communities where, when you move in, there might not be a single thing wrong with you, right? You're
Yeah.
still living your life, right? You might not even be retired yet, for that matter. So it's definitely, I think having somebody to help sort of break that down is really very, very helpful.
The one thing I hear, I'd say almost it's like a broken record when I follow up with clients that have made the transition and move into senior housing is that they all pretty much simultaneously say the same thing, which is, I wish I had done this sooner, right? It's just, it's that emotional piece of the overwhelming of what to do with all my stuff and how do I get there? And, I don't want to move. I'm comfortable where I am. It's about change and it's not an
Nobody
easy
likes it.
process.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And the stuff is a big part of that. Right? I mean, I know I'm 54. I know for just for myself, my husband and I have been thinking about moving. Just the thought of going through the, years of memories in this house and getting it down to something that, is gonna somewhere different, and
Yeah.
going through and paring down and not torturing my daughter with all of the things that I have in my house, for the next place. It's overwhelming.
And I had I guess you could say, the pleasure of dealing with this for not only my parents, but my in-laws. And both were two different situations and whatnot. But, we dealt with sourcing all the stuff and where it should go and how to deal with it. Fortunately, we have, in fact, I think it's on might even be the next, maybe not. I was going to say it's about too sly. I'm getting ahead of myself, but we have a whole system to help people for that. So
Yeah,
we'll cover
no,
that shortly.
yeah, no, that's one of the things that I think makes you so unique from any other realtor I've ever talked to, is that it's not just about buying and selling, it's
Oh,
about
it's
the actual transition and everything that goes along with it. I mean, and that's it's huge, and um it's an amazing service,
thank
truly.
you. So let's talk a little bit about some of the financial and emotional support. How do you kind of get involved in this and, in that process? And talk to me a little bit about like how that roadmap should work.
It's interesting. I This year I started doing in-person gathering. I call it coffee chat, and it's just an in-person gathering
My
of
coffee right here.
yeah, and it's primarily women. Beacon Point is the largest women-founded and run registered investment advisor in the country. So we do uh, tend to cater a lot to women. I certainly work with plenty of families and couples, but we feel like it's really important for women to have a seat at the table and to really understand, everything financial in their lives. And you'd be shocked how many times I have people come in and, maybe with a stack of papers, maybe not,
Huh.
and say, my husband passed away and I have no idea. Um,
I have two of
or
those cases. Literally, I am working with exactly like that right now. And it involves like a lot of hand holding. Um, I've taken them through the process, and it's a little bit longer duration wise because you've got to get them up to speed on,
yeah,
and in each case they weren't, handling the household uh, processes. So it's a challenge.
it is. And it's like for me, it's not just like I don't know, how much money we have. And this is PS, this is not a generational thing. It's not like, oh, the 80-year-old ladies. This is I have women in their 40s who come to me and their husbands have handled everything. And now, we used to talk about the ladies in their 80s and 90s who had never written a check in their life. Well, it's the same thing now because nobody writes checks anymore, right?
Right.
Everything's done automatically. People don't talk about it. So it's a very different thing. But hand holding really is, and I call these my kitchen table clients. These are
Huh.
not people that I am going to ask to come into my office. Maybe I'm going to meet with them sometimes on Zoom, but most of the time I'm going to come and sit at their kitchen table. That's where they're the most comfortable. That's where all their stuff is.
Okay.
That's how they feel relaxed and not panicked. And that is, there's a lot of anxiety and panic that goes along with this. And so again, understanding early on, what are your retirement accounts? What are all of your accounts? But specifically, what are your retirement accounts? What survivor benefits do they have? We're sort of at this like I think turning point for people where folks who are in their 80s or still in that like pension era, right?
Okay.
Where a lot of their retirement assets are in a pension, and those pass to our spouses differently than an IRA or a 401k. So understanding what all of those survivor benefits are, your health insurance, same thing, what are you entitled to, all of that. And like you said, just being really patient around and being a resource because it's not just going to be the retirement, the financial. It's, hi, Rebecca, my toilet broke and the plumber is here and he's saying it's going to be $1,700 and that feels like a lot of money. Is that normal? Yes, it's $1,700. Get your toilet fixed, right? But like being that person to just, because we're all used to having, not all of us, because not everybody's married, but those of us who have been married are used to having that second person that, like, where you sort of have that check-in. Am I crazy? Is this, and I spend a lot of time being sort of that second person. Um, uh, and sometimes I have some people who, you know, their spouse passes and they come in and they say, I never took the time, but I really want to understand this now, right? And so we spend a lot of time on education and some people really get into it. And then we have others who come in and they all come in saying that, I really want to understand it. And then some will then kind of say, you know what? We've spent a lot of time together. I have a lot of confidence and faith and trust in you. And if you're saying this is like how we need to proceed, then like I'm comfortable and confident with not needing the long drawn out explanation, right? So, and my job is really to kind of figure out where the person is on that spectrum of how much information they want and then of course fitting in sort of compliance things around like we have to have this conversation. I'm sorry, I know you don't want to, but we have to have this conversation. And then, how do we scale that to meet the client where they are, right?
What I'm hearing is that, and what I love so much about when we had lunch about you is your superpower and my superpower are very similar. You are very extremely compassionate, right? So you you go above and beyond. It's not really about the financial piece. It's really so much as the emotional support. When you said about being that second voice or second person and helping your client, that just comes through like amazingly well. And I think that that is clearly your superpower, right? If you were to pick one thing, is that it?
Yeah, I mean, I came into this business. I started my career as a paralegal, and I did litigation work, um, medical malpractice
Okay.
work. Um, uh, Early on, I did divorce work, and one of the things that I would see very common is, everything's done. The client gets a substantial amount of money and then they're completely lost. Either family comes out of the woodwork or they just have no sort of concept of money. And I would just watch so many clients squander what they had.
Huh.
And at some point, I kind of realized I could help these people so much more on the other side of this transaction. And so in like early 2000, I transitioned from paralegal to financial. And it really has always been for me about serving my clients and having your investments set up in a way that is appropriate and suitable for you is super important, of course. And, having the right tax plan to make sure that you're not, losing assets to Uncle Sam is important. But most of all, it's peace of mind, right? It's that you're going to sleep at night, not worried about money. That's just the last thing. Worry about your kids if you want or need to. Don't worry about money.
What I also learned when we met for lunch is that besides the fact that you're a financial planner, you have the resources. It sounded like they were all kind of in-house, if I'm not, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like from those tax questions, and I get these questions like almost daily. Again, I have my master's in tax, so like I don't actively practice, but I
But you get it.
understand. I understand, but I always refer to the professional, right? That's up on the latest. And it
Mhm.
sounds like you have that under your roof, right? You have all those various pieces under your roof, right? Is that
Yeah, so Beacon Point we have attorneys on staff who will review estate documents.
okay?
We partner with your attorney, so we don't actually draft documents. But in a lot of cases, we have like kind of all the hard conversations that a lot of people have sitting in front of an attorney at $800 an hour. We'll do those conversations, in our office, kind of draft up like a letter of recommendations that you take to your attorney so that all of that sort of pre-conversation is done and you're going in and getting down to business so that, it's just a little more efficient. So we do that from the estate planning. We have many tax professionals on staff as well. Again, we do not draft 1040s,
Got it.
but we make recommendations and we partner really well. And there certainly are financial firms out there that draft and do tax returns. I always think having sort of a partnership where you have kind of two sets of eyes and two
Absolutely.
perspective is really, it's that it creates some checks and balances that I think is really smart, particularly in the older space, because it's so easy to miss something. So often, we're dealing with mom and dad and, their son or their daughter, and something gets missed in the, transactions of that. So, sort of being that middle person to make sure everything gets covered. And frankly, unfortunately, so many seniors are victims of fraud
Rod.
that, again, having sort of a checks and balances approach, I think is really, really smart.
My number one encore presentation, Rebecca, is one we did with an attorney, and we did a deep dive on the sale of a primary residence. And it's all about how to get a $500,000 federal exclusion from taxes on the gain of the sale of a house. So I was with a client yesterday. The husband has passed away. She's in a very large house and she's kind of in that journey trying to figure out what to do. But one of the first things I said to her was, hey, let's watch that date of death because that could save you $250,000, right? So they were joint tax filers, and the IRS has a provision that depending upon when your spouse passed away, if you sell in that window of time, you can get the benefit of a 500,000 federal exclusion instead of a 250,000 exclusion. So talk about adding value to somebody is just by giving them that thought and idea because it does play into the timing on the sale of the primary residence.
Well, and I would add on to that having a really good investment and financial professional to team up with that, because the current market atmosphere is such that, like, the US market has been on such a tear,
Yeah,
that, like, active mutual fund managers add very little value to a
yeah,
relationship anymore, right? So the whole financial world has had to sort of pivot and say, okay, if we're in this space, how are we adding value to our end users? And it's all about tax planning. And so there are investment strategies that you can use to try to offset some of those gains as well. And, particularly in situations where, somebody bought their house in 1962 for $7,000
yeah.
and they're selling it for $2.5 million.
Yes.
Like, the exemption is great, but it's only going to help you so much.
So much. Yeah.
And so, having a good investment strategy to offset some of that, and again, these are things that you don't necessarily, at a high level think of as they are two things that go hand in hand, but they absolutely do. And I see more and more and more of that, of the sort of intertwining of all of the facets of financial planning, more and more. So again, having that sort of, I don't want to call it one-stop shopping in that, we will complete your estate documents or complete your tax plan, but more in terms of like a really high level oversight of all of it, um, will make a huge, huge difference. And, taxes are by far the easiest way to, to deplete your assets quickly, right? And so it matters, and having somebody who really understands how all of those things work together and how you can make them work in your favor rather than against you is huge.
Well, you kind of tee up my next screen, and I might have jumped a little sooner, but we talked about it a couple slides ago about adding value and some of the things we do. And one of the things I've been having huge success is this concierge service that I built um, back in probably like in the late 90s. And the concept of it was I wanted to add value to my clients, right? So that if there's something they need to get done, I mean, anything from you mentioned the toilet problem, the HVAC. They need help with estate planning. They need electricians, pest control, all these various things. We don't have any financial stake in any of these people. The idea of it is we want to give our clients the best possible recommendation, and we like to follow up with them. So if we do give a client someone to, for example, they need an electrician, we'll follow up and check in and make sure were they satisfied with the person? Was the price reasonable? Did they show up on time? All those things, because if somebody isn't performing just as quickly as we add them to our system, we also remove them if they're not, if they're
Yeah.
not doing a good job. But we have clients that have never going to move and just call us and they need all kinds of services. So we have hundreds and hundreds of different vendors. And I always try to match based on like what their needs are. Do they have an economic constraint? Is it a speed issue where they need to get something done quickly? Can they wait a little bit? Because some of our people, the handymen are, kind of one-off people where there's not a huge administration behind them. So they might be slower, but economically they're super reasonable compared to some other vendors. So we try to do as best as we can matching the people up.
This is so massive because I will tell you again, being somebody who is like sort of in this season of life of getting my home ready, finding a handyman, I don't have to tell you. It's any of these things. And not only finding one, but then finding one that actually shows up
Uh,
feels
Yeah.
like, a miracle. Um, and or shows up and finishes.
Yeah. Yeah. We monitor these people, so we kind of know who our quick responders are, and we tell the client like in advance, look, this person hey, there might be some kind of language barrier, or, they work with, it's a one person operation, so you might wait, or I know this person can get it done in a week. Some of these people we send so much business to that when they know it's coming from us, they drop other jobs and say,
Right.
we'll do it. So that's kind of how it works, and it's been a huge part of what I do. I couldn't do what I do because a lot of my senior home sellers, some of them literally hand me the key and say, I don't want to be involved in this. You handle it, right? So it's like what to do with their stuff. We look at, is it going to an auction house? Are we going to have a tag sale? Are we sending it to a resale shop? Is it antiquities? Do we need to bring in people to appraise it? Do we
Praise
need to
all
have,
day.
are there vehicles? Are there jewelry? Are there paintings? And we look at all those different facets and try to match up who we think our best person that's the most honest and reliable and trustworthy. And that's how we like to handle that process.
And I think honestly, like these kinds of connections, I mean, I think you and I both are sort of power networkers. We really
Yes.
like to get ourselves out in the community, meet people, and it's um constantly sort of having that, Rolodex to sound
Yeah.
old of people. And I do very similar. I partner often with a person who's a daily money manager which is you know Bodie. Do you know Bodie
Yes. Yes. I
Hannigan?
know
Yeah.
Bodie. Yep.
So
Absolutely.
so she'll help with making sure bills get paid and
Paid.
mail being opened and stuff like that. And that's one of the spaces I talk about as you get into the, late 70s, early 80s. Like,
Yeah.
are you paying your bills on time? Do you need kind of some help from your kids, or do you not want your kids in your business and you want to hire somebody on the outside? I think all of those things are huge. And I think this also brings a really good point of, when you have these things, again, that are seemingly completely unrelated to your financial planner or your realtor,
Yeah.
still ask them the question, use them as a resource. I many, many years ago had a client whose husband passed away, and she was really into art, and she wanted to have a portrait painted of him. I helped her find and commission a painter to have that done, right? Like, does that have anything to do with financial planning?
Nothing.
No,
But
no. But did it make her feel good?
yeah.
Yeah. And did
Yeah.
it? And did she sit at her dining room table at a dinner party and say, "Oh, my financial advisor found this amazing person for me"? She sure did, And then, who knows what happens from that? So, it's always, I think. Um, you have a team for a reason. You hire a team for a reason, and they are almost always, if they're really good, they're going to have somebody in their back pocket for so many things that you don't think are remotely related. So have the conversation and have the relationship with your professionals and your team that you feel comfortable having that relationship or asking that question.
So if you could you talk to a little bit us about what your holistic approach looks like and how that kind of dovetails into what we're talking about today?
So again, when we look at all of this sort of through the decades, I'm looking at it from a very high level and all of the sort of facets of your financial life and how um how do each of these things all work together and how
Okay.
do I meet you where you're at right now, right? And I think that's so important. I talked a couple of minutes ago about a more sophisticated investment approach that'll help with taxes. Well, that's great if you understand it. But if you are sitting in front of your financial professional and they're pitching ideas to you that you have no idea what's going on, like ding ding ding, red alert, like that's probably not the right person for you. You should understand what your investments are. And I think it's really about meeting you where you're at, knowing that there's sort of an art and a science to financial planning, that the science and the numbers mean nothing if the art or the emotion doesn't match it, right? And so, we look at your estate plan, and very often, people come to me and they wrote their wills, when their kids were two, and now their kids are 35 or 45, and they have seven grandchildren. And so, how do we get those up to speed and appropriate for, the not only the stage you're at in life, but the stage that your heirs are at in life? Again, the tax planning arm, that alone is so important and so builds so much value, like actual financial value in the relationship. It's huge. Looking at insurance and making sure, so often people come to me and they have like this giant basket of life insurance. And I'm like, why? Why? You don't need it, right? You're paying, tens of thousands of dollars in insurance premiums that you don't need, right? How can we, realign that money with your goals and values, right? Can we shift that into something that would help you with long-term care? Long-term care insurance is not what it used to be. There are so many different new approaches to it that, it used to be you would pay these premiums, and if you didn't use it, it was just like your homeowner's
Yes.
insurance. You snooze, you lose, it's
Lost it.
done. Now there are many new products. We don't generally get into selling any of those products, but can make recommendations and can certainly evaluate recommendations that you have from, a life insurance or insurance broker. Um, and then again, how does this all fit together and how does it work in your life? How do we, as you get older, include your family in the plan in a way that suits you,
Hmm.
right? Because, um, so often I look at myself now and I feel like, I'm like a Gen Xer, so we're like open books. We share everything with
Yes.
everybody. We don't care, right? But our parents were private, right? They didn't necessarily want to share all of their information. So, how do we have that sort of family meeting where everybody feels like they're informed, but nobody feels like they're sitting at the table naked, right? Like that it's they're helping their family, they're helping themselves and helping their family for the future. And in this stage of life, and as we get to sort of the needs around senior housing, it's really important. It's really important that, the relationship goes beyond just the client, but, who are the people who are going to be helping them as they sort of transition.
You also, one of the things I found really fascinating when we spoke was you have some really interesting uh, alternative, are they more sophisticated um, financial products that I hadn't heard about those before. So I didn't know if that's something that just it's part of Beacon or if you could elaborate a little bit about that, because maybe some people on the call are looking for some more diversification and things.
So we look at this all wealth approach. We look at it in sort of three pillars of your
Okay.
life. One is, um, you know, uh, uh, institutional approach to investing. One is life and legacy planning, which we've really talked about a lot. And the last is around philanthropy, giving, and sort of having that next generation included in the approach. So the institutional approach is really sort of the heart of our investment philosophy and where we really came from. And that includes, in most cases, um, including alternative investments in the investment portfolio. So, what does that mean, Rebecca? It means having private equity, private credit,
Wow.
real estate, hedged equity, hedge funds uh, in the portfolio. And it used to be sort of in the olden days, most people couldn't get access to
Yeah.
those types of investments unless they had tens upon tens of millions of
Millions.
dollars.
Yeah.
You had to be what's called a qualified investor. You had to the minimum investment would be really huge, and there were a lot of fees that went along with it, very complicated tax reporting. You wouldn't be able to file your return until October, and then usually you might even end up having to file an amended return because like private equity often doesn't
Yeah.
report very
Yeah.
late. So it was really not for the faint at heart. More contemporarily, more and more of these strategies are available. And frankly, the biggest part of the investment market lies in the private space. The public market is a shrinking market. It's expensive to be a publicly held company. There's a lot of reporting and things that people just have become less and less interested.
Okay.
And so we spend a lot of time vetting that space. We also have a what's called the Beacon Point Multi-Alternative Fund, which is a fund of funds
Huh.
around alternative investments so that you get not only the diversification of alternatives, but diversification within the
In that.
alternative space. And so what we find with alternatives is that over time, you'll have much less volatility in your portfolio because they move sort of slower. You're not sort of seeing that daily up and down
Up
of
and
the
down.
market,
Yeah.
but sort of a slower, smoother um, risk-adjusted return that is often more suitable for somebody who is a little more nervous about the market. They tend to be long-term investments, so it's not something you're gonna, you're not gonna day trade.
Okay. Into
It's a commitment.
the hold it, buy and
Yeah,
hold.
yeah, yeah,
Well, I hadn't heard. It was interesting because when you said that, my antennas went up because I like that space a lot, and
yeah.
I was pretty impressed that that's something that your firm offered, which really got my attention.
Yeah, no, I think we have an incredible investment team. They spend a lot of time vetting in this space to make sure that, I think, if you're reading the Wall Street Journal or any of the publications out there, there's been like so much noise in the alternative space. And certainly there are risky alternatives out there. We do a lot of work to vet, what we're looking at, making sure that, we have a lot of confidence in the
Wow.
managers and the organizations that we're investing with.
Wow, that's great. Well, we're kind of going to wrap up if we could. I mean, we're getting close to, I try to say we make it an hour. Many times we go over depending on questions. I'm actually checking the chat and I'm not seeing, let me just make sure. I'm not seeing any. So either it's people are really listening and have no questions, or they'll maybe follow up, after the presentation. But I wanted to see if you had any, closing remarks that you think would be helpful. I kind of think what I heard is starting early, right? I kind of heard that as the kind of from the beginning that you were saying somewhere in the age 50 bracket to really take a hard look at, where you're going and don't wait till you're 70. That's just clearly you're going to be in a reactive state, and try to be more proactive. Does that sound about right, Rebecca? Or
I would say that, and I would say, you know, have a team, have a team.
ooh, I like that.
It's really, particularly in the investment space, it's really hard to get it right, and um, particularly in the tax space, I think, a lot of people, and particularly in the US market space that we're in right now, it's not too hard to find a winner,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Um, but it is hard to figure out uh, uh, not just, when to buy or sell, but how to buy or sell, and what the impact is going to be. Um, and so having a team, and I think so many um in again in this environment love being stock pickers and love to have that Nvidia or in their
yeah,
portfolio and
yeah,
watch it grow
yes,
and don't think a lot about what it's going to mean when you need that Nvidia money and you have to sell it and pay the taxes on the growth and things like that. um but the other thing is that God forbid something happens to you, your family, your spouse, the people who are supporting you have no idea what your mindset was or what your plan was. And so having a team, making sure your spouse is involved and part of the team if you have a spouse, and if not, that there's somebody else um, that, also knows who the team is and is comfortable with interacting with the team if they need to.
I think that's awesome, Rebecca. What I want to say to everybody, either on the call that are there today, or those of you that are listening to some of uh, the encore presentations, is stay connected. Certainly, you can follow us, like us. We do a whole bunch of different promotions and things in the real estate space. But more importantly, if anyone on the call needs help with something in your house, you have lifetime access. It's something I offer to the community. If you need a plumber, painter, electrician, handyman, whatever that is, feel free to connect with us. And the other thing is, I want people to know that we will be rebroadcasting this. So those that couldn't make it, I got some notifications, Rebecca, that people were still traveling because, it's kind of right in the beginning of the year. You
Yeah.
never know when the best time to host these events are. Um, So there's some people that said that signed up but couldn't make it today. Within about a period of about a week, we'll have this broadcast and we'll put it on our website. Rebecca, I know you're going to have it as well if they want to reach out or contact you. It's fine. That's the website address. So there's 18 other webinars that you have access to. Some of them I get tons and tons of people commenting and liking them and sharing them. So you're welcome to listen. And we're also going to send a survey out for those on the call. You'll get a survey. We just like to know, is there any other future topics you're interested in? Because it's kind of an evolving workshop series. So I look for people typically in the senior housing space that support it in some way. Rebecca today was perfect because you're right in line with our mission and what we try to accomplish. And I loved your comment about putting a team together to, you know, help you and get involved in the process early.
Yeah.
That was my big takeaway for today.
So Brett, I also wanted to mention that I do free second opinion services. So
Hmm.
if you want to reach out to me, share some information around your portfolio and just
Okay.
sort of life as a whole, I do sort of a high level evaluation of the investments, recommendations, things like that. And I'm happy to help with that. If anyone is interested, they certainly can reach out and happy to be in touch and talk about that.
And you did share some resources. We're gonna put them up on there'll be a link inside of this. We'll put it together with resources that Rebecca shared um, about and I saw different like age groups. Was I right? Like you
Yep,
had depending upon where you were in this journey, I guess there's different facets and information you might want to be thinking about for your financial plan.
correct. So it's planning through the decades. Um, and again, you'll get the resource, you'll put in your email, they'll send it to you. And again, if you're reading through that and you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to have a conversation.
And Rebecca, I can't thank you enough for spending your Saturday morning. It is a cold Saturday morning, but I can't thank you enough for being our first guest of 2026. It's a very exciting time for us, and I'm glad because I think you add tremendous value to my home sellers, and I want to thank you for your information and your compassion. I really enjoyed, you know, digging a little deeper in the topic and learning from you today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to partnering in the new year as well. And, yeah, happy 2026,
Yeah, well,
everyone.
thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Stay warm, and we'll hopefully connect. We do these every month. I know there's a whole series of them. I think we're planned about maybe 3 months out for future events. So check the website, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Awesome. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, too.